I come back to play with free will some more. Not to play with it, but to explore it and see where it leads. And so I just finished writing this. Today is 7/29. It's my first journal, and the Mayan day is 2 Eagle. It's got lots of links, so do click over to the transcript for those. All right. This is a response to Anton, HillOrStream, in our discussion of free will, and just a simple continuation of the overall discussion. I hope you won't be too disappointed, Anton. I didn't directly go down through and address your points specifically. I let heart take me where it would. Okay, what struck me as I listened to your video, link in the transcript, is that you were looking at the outward objective evidence of people's use of free will. So rather than who has it, you were seeing who uses it and who doesn't, and how. It's a legitimate perspective. What I'd like to do, though, is clarify my understandings a bit more. It's true that most of us don't take full advantage of our free will. I'd say in most cases that's due to the comfort zone effect, keeping us down and complacent. Many are unwilling to rock the boat. Now, while that's interesting, and all have their various reasons or justifications for it, that doesn't go to whether they actually have free will or not, just whether and to what extent they use it. So let's look at the sphere of influence of our free will while here in 3D. And it's true that we can get into some pretty restrictive situations or environments. Let's take someone in prison, for instance. Now, this would show us one of the most restrictive spheres for free will. How can it act there, some might say? Some might even believe the prisoner's free will has been removed from him or her until their discharge. I don't. Even those in the Soviet gulags or the terrible World War II camps in Germany had a measure of free will left. We can read the stories and listen to the few who remain with us today to see the differences in how people responded to their imprisonment. If we had no free will at all, you'd think everyone would have responded pretty much alike. But that wasn't the case. Some were crushed, maybe most. Some were heroic, and everything in between. I guess you can be crushed and heroic at the same time, huh? While their day-to-day life was totally controlled, free will is an element of the spirit, not the body. Thus, the body can have anything done to it without harming free will. Now, sure, its influence, its sphere, can be severely restricted. That doesn't take it away. I realize that there will be some who completely disagree, and that's fine. I encourage everyone to see things with your own eyes, and from heart, of course. Let me suggest that it's possible that those who disagree most are likely those who still identify with the body, largely or completely, seeing it as the self. In their world, then, they are correct. An imprisoned body has no free will. Still, that's a chosen perspective, and not the only one. When seen as an element of the spirit, of the innate being, the soul, whatever we call it, it's clear that free will can't be touched. Now, our bodies can be used and abused in terribly creative ways. Our minds can be programmed and powerfully controlled, and yet our inner being isn't touched by any of this. It remains inviolate, though such experiences do leave leave their mark that requires healing, yet such marks don't touch the spirit. Go to the transcript and see, I had a typo on top of a typo there, and it's interesting what they had to say synchronistically. Okay, so requires healing, yet this doesn't touch the spirit. One element that remains under our control, even under the most restrictive conditions, is our attitude. We're not defeated until we choose to be. And even if we have previously chosen that, perhaps unaware, we can reconsider. We have that power. Our beliefs are also something that we control. Others around us can do all they wish to try to convince us of this or that. We retain the power to choose, and many of us are mighty stubborn. At its most basic, free will could be seen as the power of choice. Each situation that presents itself to our now is a choice point. Which way will we go? Perhaps we have an infinite range of choices. In the many worlds interpretation, perhaps we literally make every choice on some world or another. Our way through the maze of all choices is to navigate by choosing the best one in each moment. And yet, perhaps some other self of ours chooses them all, chooses the rest. Now, what that does to choice, I'm not quite sure, but we still, even then, retain our ability to navigate through that maze. You choose in this moment whether to see life favorably or unfavorably overall. Now, you may think that you're forced into your current attitude, but you're not. The proof of that is to change your beliefs, which are under your control. Now, sure, while you believe a certain thing, you may be trapped in a certain way. Beliefs do that. You may have your movements restricted. Rather than dealing with it on the outside in the 3D arena, you can go within instead. Once within, you can visit your belief garden to change what is planted there. Since it lives largely in the subconscious area of mind, my way to access it is simply to choose a new belief to plant. Once I do that, any weeds of old beliefs that would like to choke the new one out come up. By that, I mean thoughts will arise that argue with the new belief. This then is your choice point, your ideal chance to eliminate any restricting beliefs. I call them weeds. To choose not to believe them is to pull them up. Now, this sort of use of free will, everyone has. Who can take this away from you? A woman or man can choose to rebel to any situation, no matter what. We could be plopped down in the midst of the Garden of Eden and say, thanks, but no thanks, you know? We do it within where others cannot reach. Cathy O'Brien and transformation come to mind. There are those who practice deep darkness present on earth, and they do take children and raise them in most cruel ways. Through repeated traumas, they splinter the psyche into many personalities, most of which they can then control. It's a very sad part of our current reality on the old earth. Now let's look at that timeline here, at her experiences across time. And that's a 4D perspective. During the time she was taken over and used by the powers that were to perform at their command, she had precious little control of herself and her life. We can't imagine the trauma these dear people go through, and the powers that know, the powers that were most vulnerable to it at a young, tender age. So yes, evil does walk the earth. Yet, now Cathy is free, right? She got out. She is speaking out to all who will listen. And it's a beautiful story, really, of the courage of a CIA operative of the powers that were, deciding to risk it all to get her out of that situation. He simply saw how clearly heinous and immoral it was, the way she was being used. Now, there was a bit more, of course, since these two are now married, and that's beautiful too. People like Cathy and those deep in the mind control network are probably those with the smallest sphere of influence for their free will, yet they still have it. For instance, she could have chosen to end her life. That would have been thoroughly reasonable under the circumstances, yet she chose life. That's a choice we make every day. These people are thoroughly frustrated and way beyond sad within. Yet Cathy made all of those choices that resulted in her eventual freedom. She had to cooperate, or she'd still be there. Now, to look at another group, let's take the average American here in the USA. We think we are free for the most part and celebrate it loudly at sports and entertainment venues of various kinds. Yet, are we? Most are still in the sleeple and sheeple stage, much less free than we know. Any who regularly watch television are manipulated. Whether they know it or not doesn't matter. The proof can be found in a 30-day hiatus, a TV fast. When you then turn it back on, you'll be amazed at how your perceptions have changed. It just won't look the same. Parenthetically, of course, during this time you've also got to refrain from movies and various media things that you could see on TV. You know, don't go checking out all the movies. That's not taking a fast like I'm talking about. In the USA, we are all mind controlled to one extent or another, and a huge portion of us quite unaware. And it goes so deep that all of us are unaware to some extent. It's just been kept so well hidden. Those waking up are pulling out of most networks of control. TV just being the most obvious one, there are many. Even reading print media with ads puts the programming in. Now, most books are still fine, but don't look at the covers and throw the dust jackets away. Educate yourself on this stuff if you don't believe it. That's a choice you're making there. The real proof in the pudding of this mind control is consumerism. We're purchasing, using, and wearing more junk than anyone can reasonably require, filling the fat cat's pockets all the while. We throw out perfectly good things to buy the latest version, and much that we buy has planned obsolescence built right in. All of this without much more than a murmur or a gripe, pretty much. And that's mind control. It fills their pockets and empties ours. The other proof is in our workaday world and routine. No one in their right mind would participate in that willingly. Money is being used as the main tool of manipulation the world around. It's work for it or be out on your duff on the street without food. I'd say that's pretty controlled. Now, there's far more, but plenty of others on the internet cover this. I don't like to dip too deeply into the darker aspects of things unnecessarily. I do feel it's important we all know about them, though, so that your initial research to establish that this stuff exists is truly important. Acquaint yourself with the facts on those things that you see are important. It's enough. One step at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. Stay in heart with it, and you'll be guided each step of the way. There's an overall flow and purpose to things being as they are. It makes sense when seen from a high enough perspective or one deep enough within. The full picture just isn't accessible to embodied mankind. For whatever reasons, while we wear these skin suits, much of our awareness isn't accessible to the conscious mind. That's just what is, and it doesn't pay to fight or resist it. I suggest a simple acceptance and being with what is. Meanwhile, we use every choice point to select the best options in the now. And thus, over time, things change as we navigate through the maze of choice options. Do we buy at Walmart or the little guy store? Do we go off the grid with solar or wind or something else? What rings your chimes? Are you going for that? Then you're using free will. Overall, I'd say free will isn't something that can be thoroughly crushed. Now, I'm saying this from a 4D perspective, 4D being time or duration, and the links that I've attached to this will lay that out pretty clearly. Thus, over someone's lifeline, or spine, as it's been called, after space-time, looks kind of like a snake. It's you from birth to death, and every moment in between being like a vertebra of the snake. So, thus, over someone's lifeline or spine, one can always see the action of free will. There may be areas where we're rather boxed in and for a time have most of our choices made for us, but overall we are still free. That is, if we can go free at some other time, then we are free now from this view. Now let's look at our use of free will. Some may say that those in boot camp, for instance, don't have free will. Because I see it differently, I say that they do. It was their free will that was used to make the choice to join the military. When they leave, that will also be their choice. If, during the days and nights of their enlistment or commission, their range of choices is rather narrowed, that doesn't mean they've lost their free will. This is just how they're choosing to use it. Do you see? If we will look, it can be seen that we put ourselves into these various situations overall. Now, sure, the Cathy O'Briens are the exception in that their parents or their abductors or someone else made these choices for them, as many kidnapped children are used this way. These are the exceptions to this, and every rule has exceptions. Yet you were not kidnapped or put in such conditions, nor was I. Most of us, thank God, weren't. A big part of our programming, received thanks to the powers that were, is to be resentful of life and to cast blame on others, to be and play the victim, to feel that way. They don't want us standing up and taking responsibility, which I read as the ability to respond for things. That's not good for their agenda. And yet, if we look again at our life, we can see the choice points we used to turn this way or that. It was always our choice at some level or another. Now, do remember, my definition of self is much broader than most. I include not only the unconscious and subconscious areas of mind, but also the superconscious or higher self in the whole that I am. So I include my pre-birth choices, including even the selection of my parents, my DNA, all of it. We are much and far more than we currently think we are, my friends. Come on. Spread your wings with me and really fly. Own more of the fullness of self. Do some work on the who am I. It takes some belief gardening to weed out those ideas and attitudes that say anything is someone else's fault. It just isn't. Until we start owning the events of our own life, we won't be standing up tall. Go within heart for this work. It's not something mind can do, nor that you need to do in your outer persona. We do it within. In fact, mind will work against you much of the way. Why is that? Well, come on, do consider. If we're all at least slightly programmed or mind controlled, then what part of us has been affected that way? Surely it's mind. Thus, mind is the last thing to trust when navigating out of this particular maze. Mind is what you're healing on this trek, in fact. I hope you see this. We've got to step back from mind for it to be visible, though. If we're mind identified, then there's no way it can be seen yet. In our overall walk through life, it can be seen that the light beings are taking our power back from all of the places and people in which we've vested it. It's a gradual thing. We've got to see it first to do it. When we trust and believe something or someone, anything or anyone, outside of Source and Higher Self, then we've given a part of our power away to that. We let it make some decisions for us, even if only minor ones. It takes over some control. In our awakening, more and more of this sort of thing begins to be seen. And it's because we're stepping out of the matrix that we can see it. While held in thrall to it, we were sheeple or sleeple at best. Now all of that changes. We discover that we do have free will, and we start using it in ways that we would never have done before. The first thing that was taken away from us was our ability to see that we were still free in any way. We thought we were trapped and forced into much of what we do. We felt we had basically no choice in many things. Work or starve, show up or be fired, that sort of thing. Polarity, duality. What I'd like us all to see is how our perspective was slowly taken over by the powers that were and the systems they set up. It's our perspective that was controlled, not us. Can you see this? The test of it is to step out from under their domination, which most of us are doing more and more every single day. In small ways and great, we take choice points and make of them our most favored path out. So the first thing we take back is our perspective, how we see things. Once we do that, the rest just follows naturally. Do you see? You will naturally make different choices as your perspective changes. And the ultimate perspective change is to discover heart vision within. Through heart's eyes, you'll see the world and the cosmos in brand new ways, inconceivable to mind. Heart can't be touched or controlled by the powers that were or anyone. Know that you stand inviolate there in your own inner kingdom, the kingdom of heart. When you first enter, it's as guest and not monarch, but the guidance is there to take that walk. More and more, you'll be in training for the divine role that is truly and rightfully yours. Not just anyone can put on the royal robes and take up the scepter, though. It takes some real stepping up, lest ego think to take control. And it will if given a quarter of a chance. Now that's the big challenge when we take a look. Most of us can easily spot at least a few enlightened egos running around teaching others from their high perch. We don't want that. And those who go for enlightenment without the full surrender, that's very much a part of it, will likely wind up that way. All monarchs had training while growing into the role, and so do we. It goes on within in our inner kingdom of heart. And that's where our advisors and counselors meet with us, mostly hidden from our conscious awareness, but not always. As we wake up more and more, these meetings and interchanges will become accessible to our outer awareness, a bit at a time. Much of it happens in dreams. Be alert, my friends. Start to walk and to feel as the divine monarchs that you are. As we do this from heart, we have no worries about ego grabbing the crown. That's only for those, unfortunately, still resident in mind. If they only knew that mind can become a part of the team instead of being the boss, it can be trained and made to see how heart really belongs in the lead. It does take determination, which most of us have in high degree. You've got what it takes. All that's required is some serious shifting, and you're in process of doing that now. As we stick both to now and to heart, all unfolds in divine order. More and more synchronicities crop up as we go along, signaling that we're headed the right way. Change straight ahead. Namaste. Meet you in heart.